Hello everybody, this is David with Liberty Guys. What I want to talk about today is the First Amendment of the Constitution and how important it is for everybody to realize that they don't need to give this amendment up just freely. Everybody assumes that it's infringible or uninfringible. Well, the government infringed on it. Wide open, blatant, in your face did it just the other day. Okay, the First Amendment is for freedom of the press, so they can print stuff, that might be maybe not anti-government, but exposing government corruption without fear of the military coming in and killing them all. They have freedom of religion. You have the right to peaceably assemble, which is a big deal, and you have a right to redress the government for your grievances. In other words, you can go to them and complain, okay? So, the peaceably assembling and the redress of grievances is the two that go hand in hand with protest, okay? Well, during the inauguration, they banned basically free speech in all but just a few selected areas of Washington, D.C. Now, bear in mind, Washington, D.C. is not a state. So it doesn't have states' rights. So whatever they do in D.C., they can pretty well get away with it because it's federal government there. D.C. is part of, it's federal property straight up. It's not a state. So, but the states' rights don't apply there. The Constitution still applies. So as far as I understand it, you still have to honor the Constitution. So they passed some sort of law last year. And I wished I knew the law name really well, but basically it says they're creating free speech zones. All right, and these free speech zones are actually areas where there is no free speech. The government comes in and cordons off areas and says that you can't complain, you can't heckle or whatever, and they've done it basically so you couldn't heckle presidential candidates on the campaign trail. Of course, that's wrong. You should be able to do that if you want, but they did it. No one's challenged them on it yet. Everybody's going along with it. Therein lies the problem. As you go, the power of government is derived from the consent of the governed. So the moment everybody decides this is a bunch of crap and decides not to go along with it, it suddenly becomes null and void. It's unenforceable. They can't force that on 350 million people. They can't do it. It's impossible. All right. So civil disobedience is the order of the day for this one. Okay. If the problem is everybody's scared of the 2 years in federal prison. Of course, I don't relish 2 years in federal prison either. So the only way that works is if you have large scale civil disobedience on the orders of 100,000 people. They can't arrest 100,000 people. It's impossible. So, that's the only way you can deal with it. And where this comes from is the freedom of the press is the initial spark that generated it. And it's because the colonists had this problem while they were under English or monarch rule of a common law called seditious libel or libel seditious. And what it means is to print negative things about the government or your governing body. Okay? That's what seditious libel is. It's L-I-B-E-L, not liable, like you're responsible for something, but libel. All right? And that's to print something negative about the government. That's what seditious libel is about. Well, they had a law about that under English common law that didn't get stricken from the books until just a few years ago. They dealt with that problem up till just like 09 or 06, I want to say, when they said they struck that out. So they've had a real problem with this for centuries. And the colonists had real big problems over that. And so they didn't want that to come back and haunt, the new government that they were setting up after they got rid of the English government. So they put in the First Amendment. We want to be able to print whatever we want. We want to be able to go to church wherever we want. We want to be able to get together in the public areas in groups as large as we want, and we want to be able to talk to the government about our problems whenever we want. So the First Amendment was set up so that they could speak their mind without fear of bayonet points coming to them, because they had just dealt with that problem. The British didn't like that, so they didn't let them do it. And you got to understand, people allow these things to go on, and they don't realize they're just giving away their liberty, and they don't think it's a big deal until they need it. Well, once you've given this to the government is real reluctant to give it back. So, it's your civil, I guess you could almost say it's your civil duty to exercise these rights. So you really need to go to public gatherings, and I'm one of the worst about not going. I've just recently started, so I'm going to try and do what I can until the end of my days. But if you would read these amendments and then look at the history around what surrounds them, you understand why they wrote the ones they did and why it still applies today. Fortunately, we don't have seditious libel. We can print whatever we want about the government. Just look at Fox News. Go to Infowars.com, you'll see some really good stuff that seditious libel would be stamping out if it could. So that's why that's there. And I've done talked the Second Amendment to death. But, the Third Amendment is about quartering of troops, because the English could quarter troops in anybody's home that they wanted to, under any conditions. The English troops had no liability, so they could do whatever they wanted in that house, and nobody could say a word about it. And it could get pretty bad. They could get away with virtually anything. And, that's why they wrote that in there, okay? And the first three amendments are there directly because of the English occupational forces in the colonies, all right? They ruled with an iron fist, and nobody liked it. So, they allowed them to, they wanted the citizenry to be able to speak freely, to be armed, so they could resist that daggum crap if it was to get their way again, and to specifically address the military coming into your home and setting up housekeeping. If you look at it from their point of view, those was pretty hard things to deal with. That was like some of the most serious issues of their day. It's important that you learn the history so that you're not forced to repeat it. Now, people will say, well, you don't got to worry about them putting soldiers up in your home. And that's for the most part true. We don't have that problem today because of the Third Amendment. But even if we didn't have it, the military bases are so rich, they got better housing than we do mostly. So they're not coming here. But that Second Amendment, that one keeps the government in check. The First Amendment is there just so we can speak our mind and go to church where we want and basically do what we want, uninhibited. And if you can't wrap your mind around that, you really need to do some reading about your own country. All right? So if you can come up with a good reason why I'm wrong, post it, and we'll go over it. But I don't think you're going to be able to. Maybe you will. The only way we'll know is for you to try. Look it up. That's what I'm asking you to do. Don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself. And you'll be surprised what you'll find out. These guys were smart. They were on their game. So with that, this is David with Liberty Guys, and I'll be signing off. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.